Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled you're here today because we're tackling an absolutely fascinating topic that sits right at the intersection of biology, sociology, and honestly, our everyday lives. Today, we're exploring a core tension that has basically defined human history, the push and pull between organic human flourishing on one hand and artificial top-down systemic control on the other. We're going to unpack exactly how autonomy actually builds stable societies by exploring a really compelling concept known as the health capital framework. Okay, let's dive into this. What actually happens when systems try to control individual autonomy? I mean, whether it's a super overbearing workplace, an overly bureaucratic institution, or really any system that tries to micromanage human behavior, we have to ask ourselves, does that control actually create order? Or does it quietly fracture the very foundation it's trying to hold together? That's the central mystery we're going to solve in today's explainer. So, here is our roadmap for today. First, the health capital framework. Second, universal laws and alignment. Third, the pathology of control. And finally, 4, restoring societal balance. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Section 1, the health capital framework and the foundations of human flourishing. So the Marcenes Health Capital framework posits something that feels quite radical in today's world. It views freedom and autonomy not just as a political preference, or some philosophical ideal, but as a strict biological and social necessity. Basically, this framework argues that human beings simply cannot thrive physically or socially without agency. The core premise here is that when individual agency aligns with foundational principles, organic stability naturally emerges. When people are able to align their choices with universal truths, they naturally become incredibly effective stewards of their own lives. You don't actually have to force people to build things up. Given the right autonomy, they naturally fortify their own health, their families, and by extension, their entire communities. The order becomes completely organic, not forced. Moving right along to Section 2, universal laws and alignment, and finding harmony with human nature. Okay, so what are the actual mechanics of this alignment? What do we mean when we say universal laws? It is absolutely crucial to be clear on this. We are not talking about arbitrary human edicts, partisan politics, rigid legal codes, or government regulations, regardless of who writes them. We're talking about innate biological and social truths. These are the fundamental principles of human nature, ecological balance, and social cohesion. It's the intrinsic rules governing things like our emotional resilience, biological adaptability, and that natural, hardwired drive we all have to cooperate with one another. There is a truly stark contrast here between natural intentionality and artificial control. On one side, you have intrinsic motivation, that deep, natural drive inside all of us for connection, purpose, mastery, and self-actualization. When we operate from here, we don't need to be forced to care for our families or communities. We just do it, right? Because it perfectly aligns with our innate nature. But on the other side, you've got external coercion, forcing behavior through rigid outside pressures. The framework shows that substituting our natural motivation with artificial coercion literally always yields an inferior, much less stable result. I absolutely love this analogy from the source material. Think of the individual as the CEO of their own life. True intentionality and flourishing require the autonomy to freely choose paths that respect your very own physical and mental capacities. As the CEO of your life, you are an active agent making conscious choices, building up a robust cumulative stock of well-being. You aren't just some passive subject reacting to the endless external demands of a micromanaging system. Which brings us to Section 3. The pathology of control and why unfair rules break society. But what happens when that CEO status is just revoked? When centralized systems, large-scale bureaucracies, or institutions try to engineer order from the top down, substituting artificial control for natural human cooperation? Well, it's fundamentally flawed. According to the framework, imposing rigid regulations and arbitrary restrictions results in 3 cascading failures: a biological toll, the erosion of organic cohesion, and a massive institutional legitimacy crisis. Let's break down exactly how this happens. The mechanisms of this failure are actually pretty predictable. First, the biological tool suppresses autonomy via unfair rules, which actually generates chronic psychosocial stress in the human body. It literally depletes our physical and mental resilience. Second, organic cohesion erodes because arbitrary barriers create a zero-sum environment. You end up replacing community solidarity with suspicion and alienation. And finally, you get a legitimacy crisis. When rules are seen as unjust and purely for control, people stop voluntarily cooperating and shift into reluctant, grudging
begrudging submission. I mean, think about your own life for a second. Recall a time you felt the chronic stress of unfair, arbitrary rules, maybe dealing with intense workplace micromanagement or a totally inflexible bureaucracy. It doesn't inspire you to build, it just drains you, right?
And that leads us to the absolute core thesis of the Health Capital framework. Quote, when systems try to control individual autonomy and introduce unfair rules, society breaks, unquote. It's a simple, objective, yet incredibly profound statement. It highlights the ultimate tension of modern civilization. You simply cannot manufacture genuine social order through coercion. When you try to artificially force it, the very fabric of society begins to fracture. So, Section 4, restoring societal balance, with autonomy as the basis of stability. We've seen how top-down control fractures society, so how do we structurally reverse this breakdown? How do we get back to those human-centric principles? Well, the solution definitely isn't to add more layers of bureaucracy. You can't fix the failures of overregulation with more regulation. Instead, you have to strip away artificial barriers across two distinct arenas. Step 1 is to empower the micro level, and step 2 is to align macro systems with human nature. At the micro level, we're talking about families and communities here. When individuals are granted the autonomy to manage their lives and their relationships in a way that actually aligns with their own values, incredible things start to happen. Families become these amazing spaces of mutual empowerment and long-term happiness. They cease being burdensome obligations dictated by outside pressure or economic stress, and they return to being the organic bedrock of a healthy society. Then we zoom out to the macro level. Stable societies require institutions that are fundamentally designed to support human potential, not stifle it. By fostering equitable environments, reducing unnecessary systemic burdens, and deeply, truly respecting personal freedom, large macro systems can actually harness the natural, intrinsic intentionality of their citizens. The goal of an institution shouldn't be to control the individual, but to clear the path for the individual to flourish. If you take away just one core thing from this entire explainer today, let it be this. True social order cannot be manufactured through artificial control. Social cohesion, family stability, and long-term physical and mental health, these things emerge organically. And they only emerge when individuals are free to align their conscious choices with the universal truths of human flourishing. So, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on as you look at the bureaucratic structures, the workplaces, and the institutions in your own life. Are our modern systems built to control human nature or to empower it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the systems around you and keep learning.